Thank you. The next item of business is a statement by Kate Forbes on Alexander Dennis Limited. The Deputy First Minister will take questions at the end of her statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on Deputy First Minister to make her statement. Up to 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to update Parliament on this topic. My previous statement on Alexander Dennis was on the 17th of September, just 2 days after the First Minister had joined hundreds of workers at Larbert as they received the welcome news that the threat of redundancy had been lifted and Alexander Dennis had decided to continue bus manufacturing in Scotland. That landmark occasion was welcomed across this chamber and celebrated in the local communities of Larbert and Falkirk. The preceding few months had been deeply worrying for the workforce as they faced the loss of up to 400 roles. As I made clear in September and reiterate today, that positive outcome was by no means guaranteed. In truth, it was hard-won, achieved only through the goodwill, determination and collaboration of a range of partners, including the management and the workers of Alexander Dennis, the trade unions and our enterprise agencies. The key contribution of the Scottish Government was to put in place a truly innovative and exceptional intervention. The First Minister was delighted to announce up to £4.1 million of Scottish Government funding towards a 26-week furlough scheme, the first time that any Scottish Government had supported a company-administered furlough scheme. The furlough grant is restricted to shop floor workers based in Scotland, whose roles are linked directly to bus production. During the grant period, the company is entitled to recover from the Scottish Government 80% of the basic wage costs of its manufacturing staff, up to a maximum claim of £2,500 per employee per month. Alexander Dennis continues to be responsible for the payment of wages above that threshold and for employers' national insurance and pension contributions. So our furlough support is a time-limited, proportionate and targeted intervention designed to preserve bus production in Scotland. Had we not acted at pace over the summer, Scotland would have lost for good the capability to build the latest zero-emission electric buses, the very technology required to decarbonise the bus network. We took that bold and innovative step because we believe that Alexander Dennis and bus building in Scotland are synonymous, and because this Government is committed to retain the skills and industrial capacity needed to build zero-emission vehicles. Alongside our duty to support the workers and companies who are producing the technologies that will power the transition to net zero, our policy is to support travel by bus and to encourage investment in a more efficient vehicle that directly emits no greenhouse gases. Bus travel remains the most frequently used mode of public transport, linking communities, people, businesses and essential services in every part of Scotland. Buses provide an effective alternative to the car in busy city centres and in rural areas, like my own constituency, where rail services are limited. Around 334 million passenger journeys were made by bus in Scotland in 2023 to 2024, up 13% on the previous year, boosted by the huge success of the Under-22 free bus travel scheme. This Government has increased our funding for bus services and concessionary travel from £430 million in 24-25 to almost £465 million this year. We invest all of this because bus offers a more sustainable way to keep our country moving in a way which is accessible to many. In addition, the Transport Scotland Act 2019 has now delivered the powers for local authorities and regional transport providers to take forward partnership working, franchising and local authority-run services, alongside their existing ability to subsidise services. Furthermore, with the passing of the Bus Services Act 2025 earlier this year, the bus sector now has increased certainty on the timing of the journey to net zero. And as Fiona Hislop advised the NZ Committee on Friday last week, we continue to support the sector with its journey to net zero, providing £45 million in a third competitive round of ScotZeb. The scheme will open for applications in early December, with the outcome of the competition to be awarded in early spring 2026. So, what has happened since furlough was announced? Well, following dialogue with individual employees and union engagement, Alexander Dennis commenced its furlough scheme on the 22nd of September. In the 8 weeks since then, and with the support of the unions, furloughed employees have been offered a range of volunteering opportunities to use their skills and support their communities until orders pick up again and production restarts. I want to praise the shop floor workers of Alexander Dennis. Their resilience and willingness to modernise operational working practices is a testament to their commitment to the future of Alexander Dennis and was a key factor enabling the company to take a different approach. I continue to engage with Unite and GMB representatives and indeed have just come straight from a conversation with both of them. I remain impressed by their determination to support their members, their desire to find solutions and their openness to change. The Scottish Government and our agencies also remain in regular direct contact with the business. The First Minister and I spoke with senior executives of Alexander Dennis and the NFI Group last week, and Scottish Enterprise continues to offer training and other productivity-enhancing assistance. R&D and operational support from Scottish Enterprise is helping the company meet market challenges and make sure that the production sites exit furlough with improved performance. Members will no doubt ask me about the order book for Alexander Dennis, and as I said in response to questions following my last statement, that is a commercially sensitive matter for the company. I will not be able to go into any detail on it. What I can say is that I've been assured that the company has been working hard to secure orders in national and international markets, and Alexander Dennis is confident in its ability to secure new work. I want now to turn to the role that the UK Government can play in supporting domestic manufacturing, because I'm aware that Alexander Dennis is meeting this week with UK ministers and will press them for change in UK procurement and subsidy control rules. As 9 in every 10 public services buses in the UK operates outside of Scotland, we want to see a long-term pipeline of orders and a supportive UK approach to subsidy and procurement. The future pipeline of demand for zero-emission buses across the UK is essential to support bus manufacturing in Scotland. Transport Scotland is working with the UK Bus Manufacturing Expert Panel, who are working with UK local and mayoral authorities to develop a demand pipeline for zero-emission buses. That work has enormous potential for Alexander Dennis. But future demand is not yet clearly visible to manufacturers, and it's not coming to market as quickly as hoped and expected. So, in conclusion, Presiding Officer, we've always been clear that the Scottish Government's furlough support scheme was a necessary but temporary measure, providing a platform to secure the highly skilled manufacturing jobs that we need for Scotland's transition to net zero during the present gap in orders. It's essential that the UK Government is wholly engaged in this matter and does all it can to support domestic bus manufacturing. And I would urge the UK Government to accelerate progress in this area towards immediate publication of the expert panel's demand pipeline for EV buses. I have every confidence that the management team and the workforce at Alexander Dennis are committed to developing great products and can win the orders that the company needs to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister. The Deputy First Minister will now take questions on the issues raised in her statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes for questions, after which we will move on to the next item of business. And I would invite those members who would wish to ask a question to please press the request to speak buttons, and I call Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and may I also thank the Deputy First Minister for advance sight of her statement. When previously asked about the procurement rules tilting the field against domestic producers, the Minister has pointed to Section 17 of the Subsidy Control Act 2022, which prohibits the giving of subsidies that are contingent on using domestic over imported goods or services. And I also note that there was a recurring theme through the Deputy First Minister's statement this afternoon, that there was a finger-pointing of blame towards the UK Government as opposed to the Scottish Government taking responsibility. But given the Procurement Reform Scotland Act 2014 mandates the consideration of social value in procurement, surely the Deputy First Minister must realise that this shows a failure on the Scottish Government to create these frameworks that recognise the social value of Alexander Dennis and other domestic manufacturers, and of course what they contribute and add to our economy. And does she accept, and it's similar to the question that I put to her last time this issue was raised, that without this progression, on the underlying structural and policy barriers that have left Alexander Dennis, our flagship bus manufacturer, exposed to unfair competition, that this will keep reoccurring until the Scottish Government actually puts these measures in place to make sure that we're not only bolstering our economy but protecting the jobs and the skill sets that we need.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I do take some issue with Megan Gallagher's characterisation of finger-pointing, because actually in my statement I think I was very open about the areas in which the Scottish Government can take action, and the proof of that is that we have taken action, and the fact that promises were made by the UK Government and we haven't seen the progress that we would like. I just read the commentary that is given by businesses themselves, including today at Mossmoran, to see the identification of UK Government policies. And the bottom line is that when it comes to procurement law is a devolved matter, but it's subject to international obligations which are reserved. And in common with the rest of the UK, we cannot legislate to allow for discrimination in favour of domestic bidders at the expense of bidders from countries with which a relevant international trade agreement applies. So to amend procurement law in order to enable preferential treatment for domestic manufacturers would require the UK to make fundamental changes to its international trade obligations before being able to amend procurement legislation. I was pleased that she did identify the progress that Scotland has made. Scotland has a sustainable procurement duty under the Procurement Reform Scotland Act 2014. That requires authorities to consider economic, social and environmental well-being. And the Public Procurement Strategy for Scotland, which is running from 2023 to 2028, reinforces that requirement, aiming to embed community wealth building, fair work and net zero objectives. So I've always invited the Chamber, when discussing these issues, to deal with the facts as they are and to give total reassurance that we are committed to supporting Scottish industry. And if you want any proof, look at what we've done at Alexander Dennis.
Daniel Johnson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And I welcome the opportunity to ask questions about this incredibly important topic. First of all, the Deputy First Minister set out that she could not provide detail on specific orders, but given that we're a third of the way through this process and the furlough scheme is contingent on orders coming forward, can I at least ask what level of insight the Scottish Government is being provided, and does she share the confidence of the firm that those orders are in train? And secondly, on the Subsidy Control Act, there was correspondence at the start, through the summer from the Cabinet Office pointing out that social value criteria can be used through the Subsidy Control Act. So can I ask, given that a third round of ScotZEB is coming forward, what re-examination of the accommodations within the Subsidy Control Act have been made by the Scottish Government, and what redesign of that grant scheme have been made in order to perhaps enable more money to go towards domestic producers? Thank you.
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you. In terms of the level of insight and the confidence that we have, I can assure the member that we remain extremely close to conversations with the company. And I mentioned that the conversation that the First Minister and I had as recently as Thursday evening on these matters. So the level of engagement at the moment is extremely helpful from our perspective to understand. And I note that the company issued a correspondence with their own workforce today as well, to just continue to give that level of reassurance. And then, of course, with the engagement with the unions as well, I'm hearing directly from them about how the workforce are feeling a few weeks into furlough. In terms of the conversations that we have had with the UK Government, we are still very much engaging with the UK Government on subsidy control legislation. Changes to the Subsidy Control Act are not likely to unlock an ability to place bus orders with Alexander Dennis, because buses are typically purchased by bus operating companies who are not normally subject to public procurement or subsidy control law. And Section 17 of the Subsidy Control Act prohibits subsidies being given which are contingent on using domestic over imported goods or services. And so our engagement with the UK Government is looking at how criteria about community benefit can be defined, and some of the points that I've shared with Megan Gallagher. But Bottom line, when it comes to ScotZeb 3, I know that Fiona Hislop updated the Parliamentary Committee last week, and considering the level of discussion that we are all having about supporting Scottish industry, I can assure him that we are doing everything within our powers, within the law, to ensure that we support Scottish industry. And I'm always open to ideas and suggestions from across the chamber, but I can assure him and others that we have taken a very proactive approach to how we use procurement to support Scottish industry.
I call Michael Matheson to be followed by Stephen Kerr.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I say I'm grateful to Deputy First Minister and also to the First Minister for their ongoing engagement with ADL based in my constituency. I think it's important that we do address what are the structural issues that have led us to this particular situation, which are around the Subsidy Control Act. Can I therefore ask the Deputy First Minister if there are two measures that you would engage with the UK Government on? The first is in relation to increasing the social value weighting across public sector procurement, potentially moving it as high as 30% in order to help to support domestic production. And the second is to ensure that domestic and international bidders are subject to the requirement for the Fair Work First policy in an equal way in the way in which the ADL invest within their workforce. Both these measures, I believe, would help to create a level playing field for ADL, but importantly, a level playing field for the workforce at ADL.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I appreciate Michael Matheson's questions on this, and when it comes to the work that my colleague Fiona Hislop is progressing around the procurement, she, I'm sure, will listen very carefully to the points that Michael Matheson has made in terms of undertaking that fair and open competition focused on operators of public service routes. But in terms of the 2 points that he has identified, he will appreciate are looking at all opportunities to continue to support the Scottish economy and key industries within the economy.
I call Stephen Kerr, who's joining us remotely, to be followed by Michelle Thompson.
Well, can I first of all thank Deputy First Minister for responding to my request for a statement on ADL. I have to say that I'm not content with the line which she's going down in respect to the UK Government being solely responsible for changes to procurement frameworks. It's also down to the Scottish Government. So can I ask her, when did she last meet UK ministers? What did she discuss? And what expectation does she have for change to procurement frameworks from the UK Government? And in respect to ScotZeb 3, can she explain what specific reforms have been made within the Scotland's own procurement systems since September to give proper weighting to domestic, economic and social benefit and industrial capacity?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I engage regularly. If he wants to know my diary, I engaged with the UK Government Minister as recently as the end of last week, I think it was, mid to end of last week, and that was the Secretary of State for Scotland. And in terms of the points that he has asked around changes since September, I think I laid out quite clearly in my answer to Megan Gallagher where some of the restrictions are. We have already made significant reforms to Scotland's own procurement systems. We have a sustainable procurement duty, that requires authorities to consider many of the issues that he has identified. That is then reinforced in the public procurement strategy for Scotland. The point here is not whether it's a matter of my opinion, it's a matter of fact that awards of grant funding are subject to subsidy control law and procurement law, whilst a devolved matter is subject to international obligations which are reserved.
I call Michelle Thompson to be followed by Claire Baker.
Alexander Dennis has an important footprint across the entirety of Falkirk District, and I'm grateful for Scottish Government support. However, despite this, the wider supply chain is also at risk, and the Cabinet Secretary correctly calls for the UK Government to accelerate the demand pipeline for EV buses. But can she also confirm that there's also positive implications for the wider supply chain in calling for this action, and this makes the need for pace even more important?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, Michelle Thompson's absolutely right to highlight the impact on the wider supply chain. It's something that we've been very conscious of throughout, and why we recognise that Alexander Dennis was essentially a critical asset within the Scottish economy and within that area. In terms of the impacts on supply chain, we have focused very much in our support for Alexander Dennis on how to ensure that they have an appropriate order book, because whilst there's various different initiatives that we can support, like furlough, ultimately the long-term future of the company and the knock-on benefits to the supply chain are contingent on a healthy order book, and that remains the focus for the company.
I call Claire Baker to be followed by Jamie Hepburn.
Thank you. A number of members have asked about procurement rules. Under current procurement rules, Greater Manchester Combined Authority had already purchased over 160 buses from Alexander Dennis since 2022. That is more than 4 times the ScotZeb scheme from the Scottish Government did. 67% of ScotZeb 2 orders were then sent to Chinese manufacturers. So could the Cabinet Secretary clarify, a number of people have tried to get clarification on this, but could she clarify how the current round of funding of ScotZeb will prevent this happening again?
Deputy First Minister.
Labour keep rerunning this question, despite the fact that I think we've provided facts in the past, and we have pursued suggestions that have come to us. So, for example, the big Labour question used to be, why did we not use the CCS framework? I think the CDL also suggested that approach, and unlike Transport for Greater Manchester, Transport Scotland does not own or operate buses, and therefore there is a limited rationale for Transport Scotland to procure the buses directly, and so we will continue to exhaust all the options at our disposal to support ADL going forward.
I call Jamie Hepburn to be followed by Mark Ruskell.
The Deputy First Minister mentioned the Transport Act that this Parliament passed in 2019. Does she agree that Alexander Dennis is very well placed, just as local communities are looking for improved bus services, to benefit from local authorities using the franchising powers they have under the terms of that Act?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, we want all local transport authorities to be able to improve all of the bus services within their areas, and I've seen huge progress in my own part of Scotland as well. And through legislation, we've given local authorities powers on partnership working, franchising and to run their own bus services. So that approach enables local transport authorities to determine what is best to address any transport challenges in their local areas, and it devolves decision-making and allows for a much more tailored approach across Scotland.
Mark Ruskell to be followed by Willie Rennie.
Can I welcome the fact that 26-week furlough scheme has been in place now since September and is obviously supporting workers at ADL, but I'm still trying to gauge, Deputy First Minister, how deep the commitment is for the Scottish Government to ADL. What would happen if the orders don't come at the end of that 26-week process? I hope that they will. Will the Government be prepared to extend the furlough scheme? And in terms of ScotZeb 3, obviously £45 million coming out of that. We would hope ADL would get some business on the back of that. But will that be announced before the end of the furlough scheme, which again might help to give ADL some more certainty?
Deputy First Minister.
The member will appreciate that I don't want to get into hypotheticals of the what-ifs. Things don't go as we hope, because we are working extremely hard to ensure the best outcome for Alexander Dennis. And the whole point of implementing a furlough scheme was to give us a bridge so that we could overcome this gap. So we're remaining very close to ADL. He will recall that when we first announced the furlough scheme, I was very clear that Alexander Dennis was responsible for evidencing substantial orders before any grants can be claimed, and the whole approach here is to ensure that there is an order book. So I will avoid answering the question, but I hope he can see from our track record that we absolutely have done everything we can to support ADL to this point, and that should give confidence that we will continue to do everything that we can to support ADL going forward.
I call Willie Rennie to be followed by Jackie Dunbar.
The Deputy First Minister is not able to tell us an awful lot about Alexander Dennis following on from her previous statement. So can I ask her about the franchising powers from the 2019 Act that Jamie Hepburn referred to? The First Minister will quite rightly identify to the Deputy First Minister that Stagecoach are a law unto themselves in Tayside and in Fife, chopping and changing services on a regular basis. But we won't get these franchising powers in Scotland until at least 2030. Why is it taking so long to get these powers in place? They're moving forward in Strathclyde, but Fife is even further behind.
Mr. Rennie.
Why are we not making progress?
Could I just say I'm not entirely sure of the direct relevance of that question to the statement. I think it is a bit wide, Mr. Rennie. Thank you very much, and we'll move on to the next question, which hopefully will relate directly to the matters raised in the statement. I'm hopeful that Jackie Dunbar will be on point, and then I'll call Douglas Lumsden. Point of order, Mr. Rennie.
The franchising was specifically referenced by the Deputy First Minister in her very own statement. And in fact, Jamie Hepburn also referenced franchising in his question. So I think it's particularly appropriate.
Well, I heard a lot of talk about franchising in Tayside and Stagecoach and Strathclyde, and I'm not really entirely sure that's all relevant to Alexander Dennis. And I think, as I say, I would like to move on to Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'll try my best. Can the Cabinet Secretary provide an update on the latest Scottish Government engagement with employees of Alexander Dennis and trade unions, and how their vital input has contributed to the point we have reached so far?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I spoke separately to GMB and Unite the Union earlier today, and heard directly from the shop floor workers. We talked about the general sense of well-being of the workforce. The point was made that obviously now 6 or so weeks in, it becomes even more important for workers to have other opportunities, which is why we were supporting volunteering opportunities, and that is particularly the case if the furlough scheme lasts for the full 26 weeks.
I call Douglas Lumsden to be followed by Kevin Stewart. Mr.
Presiding Officer, through ScotZeb 2 funding, 44 buses were purchased from Alexander Dennis, while 171 were purchased from Yutong in China. Now, the Deputy First Minister has said that ScotZeb 3 will be different. So can I ask the Deputy First Minister, will that require a change of law to be different? And if it's not, is that an admission that ScotZeb 2 got it wrong?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I would urge the member to look at the letter that Fiona Hislop sent to the Economy, Net Zero and Transport Committee last week, because that sets out the contents of ScotZeb 3. She stated in that letter that the new phase will build directly on ScotZeb 2. It will take the form of a fair and open competition focused on operators of public service routes. The scheme guidance is being finalised, and ScotZeb 3 will open for applications in early December. I'm sure he'll appreciate that in the spirit of moving at pace with these opportunities, which I know Parliament is always keen to see us do, to go through an entire legislative process would mean we're probably still talking about it this time next year.
And I call Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's vital that we continue to stand up for Scotland's manufacturers like Alexander Dennis and to protect skills, jobs and industries. Can the Cabinet Secretary give us an insight into the challenges posed by UK economic policies, such as the Energy Profit Levy, or in the case of Alexander Dennis, the Substance Control Act, and those policies' impact on jobs and economic growth?
Deputy First Minister.
Take my lead from the companies themselves and the reasons that they give for either closure or redundancies. And in many cases, we know that the policies, whether it's Subsidy Control Act or procurement, or, as he mentioned, the Energy Profits Levy, do need to be resolved at source. And I put on the record that I'm very keen to work with the UK Government to do that. We saw a lot of positive sentiment when Alexander Dennis first expressed concern about their future. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that pipeline of opportunities, manufacturing opportunities, and we haven't seen any tangible suggestions for changes to procurement or subsidy control, which would enable a more proactive approach to supporting domestic industry.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister. That concludes the statement. There will be a short pause before we move on to the next item of business to allow frontbench teams to change position should they wish. Thank you.